Are you curious about what's under this armor?" she asked, her voice cutting through the hum of the dying station like a blade. And in that moment, standing beneath flickering lights, with vacuum gnawing at the hole beyond us, I realized curiosity might be the most dangerous force in the universe. I tilted my helmet slightly, the servos whispering like something breathing in reverse, and said, "You won't like the answer," but she stepped closer anyway, boots echoing across the hollow metal floor, eyes reflecting my visor's opaque black like she was trying to see her own future in it, like she thought I was still human, like everyone always does at first, and I could feel it again, that hesitation, that fragile tether to who I used to be. Stretching thinner as her hand hovered near my chest plate, inches from the seals that had not been broken in over a decade. Not since the incident, not since I stopped needing air. "You saved me," she whispered, searching for something in me that no longer existed. "I deserve to know who you are." And that word, "who," almost made me laugh. But laughter is something I only remember conceptually now, like warmth or sleep. The station groaned, a long metallic scream as another section depressurized, and somewhere far below, something moved that shouldn't move in vacuum, something that had once been crew, and I knew time was collapsing around us, forcing decisions I had avoided for years. "If I show you," I said slowly, each word dragging against the silence, "you won't see a person." And she shook her head, stubborn, brave, painfully alive. "I've seen monsters," she replied, and I wondered if she had truly, or if she just meant things with claws and teeth and recognizable hunger. Not the kind that rewrites matter itself, not the kind that forgets where it ends and the universe begins. My gauntlet lifted, heavier than it should have been, fingers trembling. Not from fear, but from instability, from the constant invisible shift of what I am beneath containment. And I pressed the release at my collar, just enough for a thin seam of darkness to split open. Not shadow, not absence, but something deeper, something that bent the light instead of blocking it. And the air around us reacted instantly, curling inward as if reality itself were inhaling. And she froze, her breath catching, her pupils dilating as she stared into the impossible slit where a face should have been. "That's not," she began, but language failed her because what she saw wasn't a thing that could be described. It was movement without direction, depth without distance, fragments of stars collapsing into patterns that almost resembled emotion, before dissolving again, and I felt her mind brush against it, just for a second, before recoiling like it had touched something infinite and cold, something that remembered being human but no longer understood why that mattered. I was exposed, I said, my voice now layered, overlapping with something vast and distant, to something we were never meant to find. And the station shuddered harder, as if responding to me, as if recognizing its kin. Because the truth is, I didn't just survive the incident. I became it, a fracture given form, a containment suit wrapped around a growing absence. And her knees buckled slightly as she tried to step back, but couldn't look away, couldn't unsee the way my outline flickered, the way the armor wasn't holding something inside so much as delaying something from leaking out. Why are you still here?" She whispered, her voice small now, fragile, and for a moment, just a flicker, I remembered her question as something that once had a simple answer. But now it's like trying to define gravity. Because I said, gently sealing the armor shut again, the darkness snapping back into invisibility with a soft, final click. "I'm the only thing it hasn't fully replaced yet." And that was when she truly froze, not from fear alone, but from understanding, from the realization that whatever I was wasn't stable, wasn't contained forever. And as the last lights in the station died in the distant, impossible movement grew louder in the walls, she looked at me not as her rescuer, but as the beginning of something far worse. And I turned away, already feeling the seam strain again, already wondering how long I had before there was no under this armor left to reveal it all. "Don't come any closer," I warned, my voice distorted behind layers of composite alloy and failing signal filters, yet she kept walking toward me anyway. boots echoing through the hollow corridor of the derelict station as if the silence itself were urging her forward. And I knew right then whatever happened next would not end well for either of us. The emergency lights flickered in erratic pulses, painting her face in red and shadow, while my armored reflection stretched and warped across the curved bulkheads, making me look taller, wrong somehow, like the suit didn't quite agree with the shape it was containing. "You're the one they sent the distress call about," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying something sharper, curiosity, the kind that cuts deeper than fear. "You've been here alone for how long?" I didn't answer immediately because time had stopped meaning anything the moment the breach happened. The moment the stars outside stopped looking like distant lights and started looking back. And instead I tilted my head just slightly, enough for the servos in my neck to emit that low, almost organic whine that always unsettled people, long enough to know you shouldn't be here. I finally replied, and that should have been enough. It should have sent her running back to her ship while she still had the chance, but she smiled, actually smiled, as if she had just confirmed something she'd been hoping for. "Good," she said, stepping even closer now, close enough that I could see the faint tremor in her hands. "Then you can tell me what's under the armor?" And there it was, the question that always comes eventually, the question that turns relief into dread, because people can accept a silent rescuer, a faceless protector, but they can't accept not knowing. They can't stand the idea that the thing saving them might not be human at all. "You don't want that," I said sharper this time, but she shook her head, her gaze locked onto my visor as if trying to pierce through it. "I do," she insisted. "You saved my crew. You dragged me out of vacuum. You've been watching over this place like some kind of ghost. Don't I deserve to know who you are?" And again, that word, who, like it still applied. Like there was a name or a face waiting patiently beneath the plating. Like I hadn't already lost those things somewhere between the first alarm and the moment the hole split open and reality poured in. "If I show you," I said slowly, feeling something shift beneath the armor, something restless. "You won't see what you expect." And for the first time, she hesitated just for a fraction of a second. But curiosity won anyway. It always does. "I've seen enough out here not to expect anything normal," she replied, and I almost admired that almost, because bravery built on incomplete understanding is just another form of ignorance. And I had seen what ignorance becomes when it touches the wrong thing. The station groaned around us. A deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the floor and into my frame, and I felt it answer, felt the thing inside me stir in recognition, like something hearing its name whispered from across a vast distance. "Last chance," I said quietly, my gauntleted hand rising toward the collar seal, and she stepped closer instead of back, her breath fogging faintly against the cold metal of my chest plate. "Show me," she said, and there was no fear in her voice now, only anticipation, only that dangerous need to know. So I did what I had sworn I wouldn't do again. I released the first lock. The sound was soft, almost delicate, but the effect was immediate, a thin seam opening along the edge of my helmet, not revealing skin or bone or anything remotely human, but something that didn't belong in a confined space, something that didn't belong in a body at all, and the light around us bent, not dim, not blocked, but curved, as if reality itself were being pulled inward toward that narrow opening, and her expression changed instantly, curiosity collapsing into confusion, then into something deeper, something closer to instinctive terror as her mind tried and failed to process what she was seeing. "That's not possible," she whispered, her voice breaking, and I could feel it reaching toward her, not physically but conceptually, brushing against her thoughts like a shadow passing over a star. "It wasn't supposed to be," I said, though my voice no longer sounded entirely like mine, layered now with something vast and distant, something that echoed in ways no human throat could produce. We thought it was energy or radiation or some kind of anomaly, but it wasn't any of those things, and the seam widened just a fraction more, enough for the distortion to intensify, for shapes to almost form within the darkness. Impossible geometries folding into themselves, fragments of something infinite trying to fit into a finite space. And she staggered back a step, her hand rising instinctively, as if she could shield her eyes from something that wasn't light. "What are you?" she demanded, and there it was again, the wrong question, the one that assumes there's a stable answer. "I'm what's left," I replied, because that was the closest thing to truth I could still articulate. When the hull breached, it came through not into the station, but into us, into our perception, into the way we define existence itself. And most of them didn't survive the transition. Her breathing quickened, her gaze flicking to the walls as if expecting them to start moving. And she wasn't entirely wrong. "But you did," she said, clinging to that single fragile distinction, and I shook my head slowly, the motion slightly out of sync with the armor. "No," I corrected her. I contained it, and that was when she truly understood, not just that I wasn't human, but that I wasn't a single entity at all, that the armor wasn't protecting me from the outside, but protecting everything else from what was inside, and the seam snapped shut with a sharp, final click as I re-engaged the locks, cutting off the impossible view and leaving only the cold, reflective surface of the helmet between us once more. But it was too late. The damage was done, and she stood there frozen, not because she couldn't move, but because some part of her mind was still staring into that gap, still trying to reconcile what it had seen with everything it thought it knew. "You need to leave," I said, softer now, almost human again right now, and for a moment, she didn't respond, didn't even blink. And I wondered if I had already lost her, if the brief exposure had been enough to start the same unraveling that had claimed the rest of the crew. But then she took a slow, unsteady step backward. Then another, her eyes never leaving my visor. "That thing," she whispered, "it's still growing, isn't it?" And I didn't answer, because silence was confirmation enough. And as she turned and began to run, her footsteps echoing faster and faster down the corridor toward whatever escape she thought she still had, I felt the pressure build again beneath the armor, the seams straining, the impossible presence inside me shifting, expanding, learning. And I realized with a cold, distant clarity that curiosity hadn't just doomed her. It had accelerated something far worse. Because now it knew there were others out there, others who would ask the same question, others who would want to see, and one day, sooner than I wanted to admit, there wouldn't be enough armor left to keep the answer contained. "Step back," I said, but my voice came out wrong again, layered and hollow, like it was being spoken through something that didn't fully understand language anymore. And still she didn't stop walking toward me in that broken corridor of the abandoned station, where the air recycler had long since died, and the only sound left was the slow, patient creaking of metal settling into its own grave. Her flashlight trembled slightly in her grip, cutting through dust that floated like frozen ash. And every step she took brought her closer to the center of something she should have been running from, yet curiosity pulled her forward harder than fear pushed her away. And I knew that feeling too well, because I had once been like that before I learned what answers cost. "You're the armored one," she said softly, almost reverently, as if the soup made me some kind of myth instead of a warning. "The one they said survived the breach." And I didn't correct her, because survive wasn't the right word. Not anymore, not for what I had become. I tilted my head slightly, the internal servos whispering like restrained thunder, and I felt the weight of the armor shift with me, not like metal, but like something aware of its own burden. "They should have sealed this sector," I said instead, glancing past her shoulder into the darkness behind her, where the station skeleton stretched endlessly, corridors folding into deeper corridors like the inside of a dead organism. "No one should be here." She let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "I didn't come here for safety," she replied. And that was when I first understood she wasn't just curious. She was committed, and that made her far more dangerous than anyone I had encountered. Since the incident, I took a slow step back, my boots scraping against the grated floor, and I could feel it inside the armor responding. Something vast and patient shifting beneath layers of containment fields and fractured seals, like something listening through my skin. You don't want to know what's under this. I warned again, more firmly, because protocols didn't matter anymore. Only restraint did, and restraint was failing. She moved closer anyway, lifting her light until it reflected off my visor, turning it into a blank, endless mirror. "I've seen what's out here," she said, voice steady but eyes sharp, with that human need to categorize the unknown, derelicts, anomalies, even the things that came out of the rift zones. She paused, swallowing. "But you're different." And I almost laughed at that, almost, because if she only knew how close she was to the truth, she would have already been running until her lungs gave out. I remembered the breach in fragments, not like a memory, but like interference, like reality tearing and reassembling itself in ways the mind was never meant to track. I remembered the screams cutting off mid-frequency, the way the lights bent inward instead of exploding outward, the way my squad suits began to translate something that wasn't data into sensation. And I remembered being the only one whose suit didn't reject it fast enough, or maybe I was the only one it chose to stay in. I don't know which version is worse. "Stop right there," I said sharply when she reached the 3-meter mark. And this time she did pause, just for a heartbeat, her breath visible in the cold air, her curiosity flickering with the first hint of caution. "Why?" she asked, softer now. And I knew that question would be the turning point, because every story like this always has one. I looked down at my chest plate, where faint lines of light pulsed beneath the surface like something breathing in code, and I said, "Because if you get any closer, you won't be asking what's under the armor anymore." She frowned, confused. "Then what would I be asking?" And I hesitated, because honesty here was not just dangerous. It was irreversible, but something inside me was already pushing against the seals, already pressing outward like pressure in a cracked vessel. So I answered anyway, "You'll be asking what's left of me." And she went still, really still this time, like the air itself had tightened around her. I reached up slowly, my gauntlet hovering near the collar release, and I felt every internal lock resist at once, mechanical systems arguing with something far older and far less mechanical beneath them. I was part of the recovery team. I continued because she deserved at least that much truth before everything changed. We were sent to investigate a signal from inside the rift perimeter, a station that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Her eyes widened slightly at that, but she didn't interrupt. "When we arrived, the station wasn't empty," I said, voice tightening. It was aware. The word tasted wrong even as I said it, because awareness implies something you can reason with, and this was not that. This was something that learned by absorbing, by rewriting, by becoming whatever looked at it long enough. I exhaled slowly, though I didn't need air, not in the way she did, and I finally released the first seal. The sound was quiet, almost gentle, but the effect was immediate, like the universe itself hesitating for a fraction of a second, and a thin line opened along my helmet seam, not revealing flesh, not revealing anything recognizable, but revealing absence shaped like intention, and the corridor lights bent toward it, not broken, not dimmed, but drawn, as if light itself recognized something older than physics. She stumbled back half a step, her flashlight shaking violently now. She whispered, though it wasn't refusal, it was disbelief trying to hold itself together. "That's not possible." And I felt her mind brush against it for just a moment, just long enough for her breath to catch in her throat, as if she had suddenly remembered how fragile thought really is. I snapped the seal shut instantly, forcing containment back into place, and the corridor returned to normal too quickly, like reality pretending nothing had happened. But her face told the truth her mind hadn't fully processed yet. "You saw it," I said quietly, not a question, and she didn't answer because she couldn't decide what she had seen, only that it had seen her back. "What are you?" She finally managed, voice shaking now. And I wanted to give her something simple, something human, something she could take home with her, but there was nothing simple left inside me. So I said, I'm the containment, and that made her go pale in a way that had nothing to do with fear anymore and everything to do with understanding. The station groaned again, deeper this time, and I felt the thing inside me respond like it recognized its name being spoken aloud after a long silence. It's still here, she whispered, glancing around as if the walls themselves might answer, and I nodded once slowly because lying was no longer possible. It never left. I said, it just learned where to hide. And she backed away step by step now, finally listening to instinct instead of curiosity, finally doing what she should have done from the beginning. But I could already feel the shift inside the armor, the subtle strain of something adapting to being observed. And I realized the worst part wasn't what she had seen. It was that she had seen it at all, because now it knew what it meant to be noticed. And as she turned and ran down the corridor, her footsteps fading into the station's endless hollow, I stood there alone again, listening to the armor creak softly around me like a promise I was slowly running out of time to keep. Are you real, or just another suit left running on autopilot? She asked, and the moment her voice echoed through the dead corridor of the station, I knew I should have stayed hidden deeper in the maintenance shadows where the lights didn't reach and the silence couldn't ask questions. But it was too late, because she had already seen me standing there in the armored frame that was never designed to be a home, only a barrier, only a last desperate promise made by engineers who didn't understand what they were sealing in. I turned slowly, every joint in the suit whispering resistance like something inside didn't want to be perceived, and I saw her properly for the first time. Boots scuffed from long travel, helmet tucked under one arm, hair floating slightly in the weak artificial gravity like it couldn't decide whether it belonged to her or the station's failing systems. And her eyes, sharp and restless, were already moving across me like she was trying to read a language she didn't know but refused to accept as impossible. You shouldn't be here, I said immediately, because that was the protocol, because that was the truth. Because everything else had already gone wrong long before she arrived. She tilted her head slightly, studying the way I stood too still for someone supposedly human. That's funny, she replied, stepping closer without hesitation. Because the distress beacon came from you. I didn't answer that right away, because I didn't send in the way she meant. Not consciously anyway, not like a person would. And the thought alone made something shift faintly beneath the armor plating, like a memory trying to surface through thick ice. She kept walking until the distance between us narrowed into something personal, something dangerous. And I could hear her breathing now, steady but curious, that particular kind of curiosity that doesn't respect boundaries. I've been tracking signals like this for 3 cycles. She continued, her voice softening just slightly. Abandoned stations, dead colonies, places where the logs don't match the damage reports. Her gaze flicked to my chest plate, where faint diagnostic lights pulsed irregularly beneath layers of reinforced alloy. But none of them ever had you. And I felt the word land heavier than it should have, because you implied separation, identity, something single and stable, and I wasn't sure I qualified anymore. Turn back, I said again, but this time it sounded less like a command and more like a warning I was giving myself as much as her. She smiled faintly at that, not mockingly, but like she had heard warnings before and decided they were just another form of invitation. I don't think you understand, she said, stopping just a few steps away now, close enough that I could see the faint reflection of my visor in her pupils. I didn't come all this way to leave because something told me to be careful. She raised her free hand slightly, not touching me yet, but hovering near the armored surface like she was weighing the risk in real time. I came because I want to know what's inside. And there it was, the question that always arrives wearing curiosity as disguise. You're not supposed to be operational. She added more quietly now, almost to herself. The suit model you're using was discontinued after the veal incident. My systems reacted involuntarily at the phrase. A faint ripple through internal diagnostics that she definitely didn't miss, because her eyes narrowed slightly in immediate recognition. So it is you, she murmured, more certain now you're the one they said stayed behind. I exhaled slowly, though I no longer needed to, and said, if you know the incident, then you already know you should be leaving. But she shook her head, stepping even closer until I could feel the proximity sensors adjust in quiet alarm. What I know, she said, voice steady now, is that everyone who survived that station described the same thing. Something in the walls, something that looked back when you looked too long. Her gaze locked onto my helmet as if trying to decide whether I was part of that story or the reason it existed. And then there's you. She finished softly, walking around inside it like it didn't kill everything else. I stayed silent because silence was safer than explanation, safer than truth. But she wasn't satisfied with that. She never was. What's your name? She asked suddenly, and I hesitated because that question felt older than the station itself, because names were something given to things that was still expected to remain consistent. Do you even remember it? She pressed gently when I didn't respond, and I could feel something inside the armor react again, not aggressively, but attentively, like the question had reached something buried beneath layers of containment protocols and written memory logs. I remember enough, I said finally, and that was the closest I could get to honesty without breaking something important. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly as if accepting that partial truth as a starting point rather than an ending. Good. She said, because I'm not leaving until I understand what you are. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just curious about me. She was curious about what curiosity had already done to everything else in this place. And as the station lights flickered once more in the distance, like something blinking away, I understood that her questions weren't the danger. Not really. It was the fact that something inside me had started listening to them. Why are you standing like that? She asked, her voice softer now but sharper underneath, like she was trying not to spook an animal she already knew could bite. And I didn't answer immediately because the question itself was wrong in a way she couldn't possibly understand yet. I was standing like this because anything else risked movement I couldn't fully predict anymore. Like what? I asked instead, keeping my tone as controlled as the suit allowed, though even I could hear the faint distortion creeping in at the edges. She stepped sideways, circling me a little, not afraid, just a measuring. Like you're waiting for permission to exist, she said, and that landed too close to something I had stopped thinking about. You're observant, I replied. That's usually the first mistake people make here. She let out a short breath that might have been a laugh if the situation had been less wrong. And what mistake are you making? She countered immediately, stopping again in front of me, close enough now that the reflection of my visor swallowed most of her face. Letting you stay, I said honestly, and for a second I thought might finally be enough to push her away. But instead she tilted her head, curiosity sharpening again instead of fading. So you can make decisions, she said. Good, that means you're still in there somewhere. I felt something tighten inside the suit at that, a subtle pressure like the system didn't appreciate the implication. You shouldn't assume that, I warned. Assuming gets people killed. She nodded slightly as if she agreed, but didn't care. People die out here anyway. She said, I'd rather die knowing what I'm looking at than run from it blind. And I didn't like how calm she said that, like she had already accepted every outcome except ignorance. You're not supposed to be this deep in the station. I tried again, shifting the subject. The outer decks are compromised. She shrugged lightly, too casually for someone standing in a place where the air itself felt uncertain. I followed the beacon, she said, It led me here. I paused at that because I hadn't expected the system to still be broadcast in anything coherent. That's impossible, I said. And she immediately latched onto the word no. She corrected. It's interesting. She stepped closer again, and I instinctively adjusted my stance. Not backward this time, just prepared. Don't do that, I said quietly. Don't come closer. She stopped, finally, but only just close enough that I could hear the faint static of her suit's comms struggling against the station's interference. Tell me why, she said. You keep warning me without ever explaining anything. I hesitated, and that hesitation itself felt like a crack forming somewhere deep. Because explanations don't help you here. I said, they make it worse. She narrowed her eyes slightly. Worse than what? She asked, and I almost answered too quickly, almost told her the truth in full before I could stop myself. But the suit's internal diagnostics spiked at the thought, like something inside it reacted to the idea of being spoken aloud. So I chose carefully. Worse than understanding, you're already inside something that's aware of you, I said, and the corridor seemed to grow quieter after that, like it was listening too. She glanced briefly at the walls, then back at me. The station, she asked, trying to ground it into something familiar, something mechanical. Stations don't think. I shook my head slowly. This one does. She frowned, not fearfully, but skeptically, like she was trying to separate paranoia from reality. That's what they all say in ghost stories, she replied. Abandoned mines, dead ships, old colonies. People always think something is watching. She gestured slightly around us. But it's just systems failing in patterns your brain doesn't like. I almost agreed with her, almost let her keep that comfort, but then I felt it again. That subtle internal shift, like something pressing gently against the inside of my armor, testing boundaries it had already tested too many times. And if it's not a pattern, I asked quietly, and she looked at me more closely now, really looked not just at the suit, but at the way I held still too perfectly, the way I answered too carefully. Then what is it? She